Gil, there's in the floor down there, we've got some quotes. And there may or may not be one from you down there, but there is one from Don Meredith. And he said, if Tom Landry were married to Rachel Welch, he'd have her cook it. There in the floor. But it's a somber bunch in here today. There, got me.
You know, Jerry, there's more people here than the first game we played in the Cotton Bowl in 1960.
That's good. It looks about like the number that was in that press conference, that room the night that you and I were there for when we came in 1989. This is about that kind of size, but first of all, thank you for being here today. And I say that on behalf of the Dallas Cowboys because this is such a privilege to basically recognize someone that has been so instrumental in, frankly, all of the pluses and the things that have made the Cowboys pluses over the years, part of which culminates in a room like this, back by a practice field out there. I dare say that when the four people got together of Clint Murchison, Tex Ram, Tom Landry, and Gil Brandt, they might have very easily had a room like this in mind with a backdrop like this. But it's a great privilege for me to be here today and announce that Gil Brandt has become the 22nd member of the Dallas Cowboys Ring of Honor. We've often said that the Ring of Honor represents the men who are cornerstones of this franchise, the men who built this organization. And my visits with Tex Ram about the Ring of Honor, the institution of the Ring of Honor, that was critical for him, that the people in the Ring of Honor have, as a part of what they were about, building the Dallas Cowboys. It's no accident that the men that actually didn't make the plays on the field that are a part of the Ring of Honor and the announcement that we're making today of Gil Brandt going in the Ring of Honor spent over almost 30 years of their lives building the Dallas Cowboys, and in doing so, doing innovative things that built the NFL, frankly. And today we're inducting a man in the Ring of Honor who has been responsible for those cornerstones that I just alluded to. Gil oversaw the acquisition of 15 of the 19 players who are currently in the Ring of Honor. And that includes 2 undrafted free agents in Cliff Harris and Drew Pearson, a pair of 7th-round selections in Rayfield Wright and Bob Hayes, and a 10th-round draft choice by the name of Roger Staubach. From that group, 9 of these men went on to become inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was also responsible for bringing into the organization 53 players who earned a combined total of 178 Pro Bowl appearances. In 30 years with the Dallas Cowboys, Gil distinguished himself at the top of his profession as an innovator and someone who set the standard of excellence in an area of player personnel. Whether it be introducing computers and technology into the player evaluation process, negotiating contracts, or inviting 80 undrafted rookie free agents to a training camp every year, Gil brought new and creative philosophy to a player acquisition that were copied by many teams in the NFL and are still being used today. In the 30 years that have passed since 1989, Gil has become one of the greatest ambassadors for not only the Dallas Cowboys, but for the entire National Football League. Each year he works at the Combine, he works at the Super Bowl, the draft, and at the Pro Football Hall of Fame induction, handling a wide variety of duties in all of those events. In addition, he has become somewhat of a cult legend as the Godfather on the NFL radio network, where he reaches millions of listeners of all ages who are fans of all 32 teams. In all, he has been involved with professional football for 60 years, and he's not done yet. On November 29th, Gil will be inducted into the Ring of Honor at our game with the Saints. He will become the 22nd man to earn that honor. And in August, we look forward to him taking his rightful place in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton. It is my sincere pleasure, Gil, a once-in-a-lifetime man who has contributed to the development and growth of the Dallas Cowboys and the NFL like few others that have ever lived. Gil Brandt.
Thank you, Jerry. You know, I'm not sure I could have written that introduction better if I wrote it myself. So I thank you. And, you know, Jerry, as he said from the beginning, I started working for a team once was called the Dallas Steers. We had 3 different names before we had the Cowboys. And I got a call one day in October of 1959 from Tex, and he said, I want you to come to work for me. I said, Tex, I don't know anything about television. And he said, no. Tex at the time was the head of CBS. And he said, we're going to have a franchise in Dallas. And I said, I want you to be the player personnel person. And I said, that's great. And he said, now, one thing. He said, kind of steal all the information you can from the Rams so that we know what free agents to go out and try to sign. And in those days, you had this old mimeographing machine, and I don't know if anybody here is old enough to realize or know what it is. And you got ink from head to toe, really. And so we had to mimeograph contracts. And with Tex, and Jerry will attest to this, everything, well, that's easy. Just, you can do that, that's easy. So anyway, I'll take you back to the first player that we signed, the guy named Jake Krauthamel from Dartmouth University. And what happened is that I went to New York and then took a train to White River Junction, Vermont, and went over to 19 Lime Road, where Bob Blackman was holding the #1 draft pick of the Los Angeles Chargers in the AFL. And so here I am, I'm 26 years old, and I won this battle with Frank Leahy. And I couldn't wait to get out of the house to call Tex, and in those days there was no calling cards or anything. You had to get some quarters and put $3.50 or call collect, whatever it was. And I said, Tex, we just signed our first player. And Jerry will attest to this. Tex was always very conscious about money. And he said, the first thing he said, how much do we pay? How much do we pay? I said, Tex, we paid $7,500, no signing bonus. He said, I can't trust you, we'll be broke. That's what it is. And so, you know, I've seen this league grow. You know, reason we didn't pay until Tuesday of the week because we wanted to be sure that the checks from the visiting teams came in so that we could meet the payroll. And one of the great stories that is told is we had a team, the Dallas Texans, in Dallas in 1952, I think it was. And the people that owned it went belly up in the middle of the year, and they became a traveling team. And on Thanksgiving Day, the Dallas Texans played the Chicago Bears in Akron, Ohio. It's the smallest crowd ever that has attended a regular season game in modern history. They announced it as 2,000 people, but there was probably less. But the upshot of it is Jimmy Phelan, the head coach, said, listen, we're going to change our way of introducing the players. Instead of introducing them, I want you to just go up in the stands and introduce yourself to everybody that's sitting up there in the stands. And one last story about the Dallas Texans leaving town, Phelan grabbed everybody and said, now here's your checks, but don't all of you scatter out and go to different banks because there's not enough money. So I think you've seen what this league has come about. And I don't know of anybody that has done a more progressive job than Jerry Jones. I mean that in all sincerity. I think the guy, you know, Jerry woke a lot of people up. A lot of people were happy to put their money in the bank and get 2% interest or 3%, whatever the going rate was. And Jerry woke everybody up. And one of the great experiences I have now, and Jerry mentioned Sirius Radio, and Jerry, they have 33.5 million subscribers, by the way. But I get the opportunity to spend 3 days at different training camps, and I want you to know one thing. I think that the Cowboys made a great trade for the wide receiver from the Raiders. I'm very familiar with him, and I think that he's going to be a great addition to the team. And don't worry about giving up the number one, because there wouldn't be a number one receiver that good coming out next year. And the over and under is 50 yards on it. So if any of you bet on the over and under, bet the over for this week is what it is. But
Okay, Gil, you did your end of the deal. Is that it?
all right, I'm through. Well, it means everything to me. You know, it's like watching a child grow up. As I said, when I came here, the first year, we were 0-11-1, and you know, it wasn't a sunny. We had very few people going to the games, and you know, quite honestly, I wasn't sure if we'd have a team 2 years from now. So from what I went through in the beginning to now is just unbelievable. And you know, Jerry did one of the best things that he ever did when he fired me, because it taught me to do some new things. And you know, I've been very active with the league as far as doing the Super Bowls. We were the first ones to put the Super Bowls on the web, the draft on the web, and you know, these are all things now that I've grown to understand. And so thank you, Jerry. You opened up a lot of avenues for me.
Gil, I was asked this morning, I think Mike, you might have, Fisher, you might have asked it, or Chris, on this radio show, but I was asked, did I have any memory of anything that Gil, a story about him scouting. And when I went in to see Gil after our first draft, by the way, which he was there, and we drafted Aikman, and we had quite a draft, our first draft. But the bottom line is that when I went in to see him, we had a visit, and it was as awkward as you can imagine. And we walked out, and in the scouting room there, if you remember the hall, and they had the kind of the opening garden out there at the top. But we walked out, and the media, many of you guys were standing there, and they said, well, Gil, what do you think? And Gil kind of looked back a little bit and looked at them and said, that guy in there's in over his head. And so my comment this morning was, I knew he was a hell of a scout because I was in over my head.
Gil, can you just, obviously you had so many players that you found. Is there one player, one story that you remember the most that's dearest to you?
I think that the one that, and let me say this, they're all like my sons. But I think the one that's closest to my heart in so many ways, who left us prematurely, is Jethro Pugh. And Jethro Pugh was a player from Elizabeth City Teachers College. And Elizabeth City Teachers College would have a hard time, and I don't think they could beat Highland Park High School. And so what happened is that you give a player a physical when they report to training camp in July. And he had been playing baseball, and he fell and dislocated his shoulder, and so his salary was $14,000 a year. And in reviewing it, Tech said, "Now, what about this guy? What about this guy?" And I said, "I think he's going to be pretty good." And he said, "Well, he better be." He said, $14,000 a year. And, you know, it turned out that Jethro Pugh it was one of the best players that we ever had. Few people realize he led our team when sacks were unofficial for 4 years. So I think that Jethro and things that I did, and incidentally, I did this. I started a deferred bank account for him, and he ended up having over $1 million worth of equity when he retired.
Gil, what did you think of the Ring of Honor when Tex started it with Bob Lilly?
Well, I think anything that Tex starts, he's put a lot of emphasis on it and a lot of thought about it, and I think he put a lot of thought about it. You know, I think that, and I took Tex up to Michigan. Schembechler was the coach up there, and they had a lot of things that were like what he was talking about doing. You know, what it does is it gives the players a sense of history, of a great franchise and the great players in the franchise and so forth. And I think that the great thing about it is, you know, some people, if you go to Denver, I think there's about 100 people up there, and I think Tex thought that the Ring of Honor was for people that did something special. And you know, there's people that do good things, and then there's people that do special things.
Gil, you've always been known as as an innovator. How much pride do you take in that, and what do you feel your legacy is in that department as far as laying the groundwork or being on the cutting edge of certain technologies and ways to analyze?
Well, Mr. Moore, let me say this. We were very fortunate to have an owner by the name of Clint Murkison. And, you know, we started the computer in 1961, and we were laughed at by everybody. And I was very active in it. We hired a fellow by the name of Salam Qureshi, who was from India, and he didn't know if a football was pumped or stuffed. And one of the great things that came out of this was in our 1963 draft, we held up the draft for 6 hours because Mel Renfro, because of the death of the president, had put his right hand through a glass window or a mirror. And so we sent a photographer down to, a doctor down from Portland to Eugene, Oregon, and held up the draft all this period of time. And Vince Lombardi walked over to our table, and he said, "What's wrong? Did your computer break down?" And walked away. And I said, "No, Vince, it's running well." And about 2 years later, he said, "You know, Gil," he said, I'd like to join you in this computer project." He said, "I think it'd be pretty good." I said, "Well, Vince," I said, "all it does is cost you about $3 million to get in, and that $3 million today would be probably $30 million. That $3 million then would be probably $30 million." So I think the fact that we were known for doing so many things first. You know, when you look at the border around the field, it's there so the fan in the stand, instead of the players all being right up on the sidelines, the fan in the stands had a chance to see things. You know, we have arrows pointing to the plus and the minus zone, as we have so many things that have come out of the Cowboy franchise. You know, Jerry's continued them, as I said, and really what Charlotte's done is off the charts. I mean, everybody would like to copy and do what they've done. I don't know if we got any guys that can jump in red kettles, but the Cowboys are either loved or hated, and it's about 75% love, 25% hate. But on Wednesday night on my radio show on Sirius, we had 31 callers. 17 of the 31 wanted to know about the Cowboys. And now these are not people from Texas. These are people from Vermont, from Alabama, from Ohio, from Washington. So the Cowboys are really, as they say, America's team. And Jerry will tell you about selling of merchandise. I mean, the amount of merchandise that the Cowboys sell is almost equivalent to all the rest in the league do. So, you know, the Cowboys are a great franchise and continue to do things every day. You don't think people talk about this facility here? There's, you know, Minnesota has their new facility just went up, and it is pretty nice. But you don't hear anybody talking about Minnesota's facility.
Gil, tell us about, speaking of facilities, AT&T Stadium. There was a time when you saw what Indiana was doing, and tell us about your role in AT&T Stadium.
Well, no, that was Texas Stadium.
Texas, yeah. I did a,
You said
yes.
AT&T. Well,
That memory, I've got to, did I make a mistake or not?
well, what happened is that I got a call from Mr. Murkison one day, and he said, come on down to my office, I got a job for you. And I started laughing. I said, does that mean I don't work for the Cowboys anymore? He said, no, come on down here. And I got there, and he handed me 6 legal pads, and I said, Clint, I'm not a lawyer. He said, just listen to what I'm going to tell you. He said, about 10 people know about it, and I want it to stay that way. He said, we're going to build a new stadium. And he said, I want you to go to the last 6 stadiums that were built and fill up all the these pads with the goods and the bads. And so I started at Oregon, and for the people in the press here, they'll appreciate this. Oregon had their press box on the east side of the field looking into the sun. And all of these stadiums, there was, you know, something wrong with it. And the best one was Indiana, but they had all this bedrock, and it was so hard for them to go down. Our first row of seats at Texas Stadium was better than the 9th row of seats at the University of Indiana as they have it now. And so we ended up somehow getting the Indiana plans that helped with the planning of Texas Stadium and built it for $23.5 million. And that's incidentally, that's the scoreboard up there. I now think was, what did it cost you, 40 million or 60? I forget.
You're close. Think about
Gil, if you can, what moves or trades over the years kind of stand out as being the pinnacle? Is the Dorsett deal up there still?
Well, that's one. Yeah, that was a pretty good trade I've made. You know, it was really interesting. You know, the trade just passed last Tuesday, and so we decided to trade Craig Morton, and I thought I had a deal made with Green Bay. And Dan Devine was the coach, and the player that they wanted to trade was a quarterback from Alabama, but he wanted me to trade the quarterback from Alabama so we would get the choice, and I ended up instead moving him to the Giants, and we got the 2nd pick in the draft, which landed us Randy White. But we also made a pretty good trade one time when we put 2 guys together named Billy Parks and Tody Smith. And we got the 1st overall pick in the draft, which ended up being Ed Jones, who was one of the great players of all time on our franchise.
Gil, who had the authority to make that trade? Tex or Clint or you?
Well, I made
Or Landry?
I made the trade and then told him what I did. You know, it's the more people you get involved in the trading business, the more confused you get. But I'm still going back to the trade you made. It's a great trade.
Jerry, can you talk about Gil in the Hall of Fame, and do you think this will help him finally get over that hump and get in the Hall of Fame?
Thank you for setting it up. Gil doesn't need any help relative to the Hall of Fame. To me, the contribution that he has made to the NFL, certainly we've highlighted, and we just have highlighted the contributions that Gil made. That was a wonderful team of people that Gil was a part of. Him, Tex, Tom, and the owner, Clint. And they were in sync. And those were different times there. But make no mistake about it, 2 of them of that team are in the Hall of Fame today, NFL Hall of Fame. And it'll be completed or be really toward completion when Gil gets in. He deserves it because not only of his innovativeness, his contribution to success, his innovativeness in his profession, he deserves it because of his tenure. If anybody does, 60 years. He has been here since you heard him describe some of the days with the Cowboys, financially speaking and otherwise. He has been in this league since it evolved from those points, which if you really look at it, that has been a dramatic time and needs to be recognized by the NFL through it. I mean, by the NFL Hall of Fame through that. So Gil gets there, period, without the Ring of Honor. But Gil deserves to be in the NFL Hall of Fame. His work has been so beneficial to the league after he left the Cowboys. And frankly, he should have been drawing a paycheck from the Cowboys because he's been such a great ambassador for what the Cowboys are. And he has inordinate people skills, and we all are aware of the sharpness of his mind and his ability to focus in on really the qualities of not just the players, but the coaches and the owners and everyone that's a part of it. He understands everything about it. Understands that he learned from not learned, but Tex really gave him an insight into television that is invaluable. I think all of it has helped him be what he's being recognized for here today, and recognized for what he will surely be, and that's have a gold jacket.